Hello sweet ladies, you're welcome back. So in today's tutorial we're going to be learning how to make a yoke with a keyhole. So last week we already talked about how to make an asymmetric yoke. If you have not watched that video, the link is right there in the description box, so go and watch it. So today we are going to be making another variation, which is a yoke with a keyhole. So for this tutorial we are going to be using our lining, our fabric, and also I'll be using this chantilly trimmings to make the yoke. I'm going to be drafting it on my lining first, and as you can see my lining is already fused with an interfacing. So I folded my fabric into two. After that I rule my guideline. I'm just going to be drafting a princess bustier. So first I measure down my armhole, my nipple point, then my under bust length, my waist length, and my half-inch seam allowance. Then after that I'm going to extend all the lines. So the guideline, I'm going to input the shoulder measurements divided by 2. Then I'll put that same measurement on my armhole line, which is also my chest line. Then I'll connect it into a straight line. Then I'm going to take 3 inches neck width and drop the shoulder by 1 so that I can get my shoulder slope. Then I'm going to add my seam allowance to the shoulder slope. Next I'll move to my nipple point, and I'm going to input my nipple to nipple distance divided by 2 plus half-inch seam allowance. And I'm just going to roll it straight down to the waistline. Then I'll go to my armhole. Starting from the shoulder drop, I'm going to locate the midpoint of my armhole like this, and then I'm going to connect it to the nipple point this way. Next thing I'm going to do is to take my dart. On the under bust I took half-inch dart on this side of the line. Then at the other side I take 1.5 inch dart. This dart depends on the client's bust measurement. Then I'll just roll it straight to the waistline like this. Then after that I'm going to use the curved part of the ruler to blend it to the nipple point this way. Then at the other side I will also use the curved part of the ruler to connect it to the nipple point. I already have a detailed tutorial on how to draft a princess dart bustier. The link is right there in the description box. Then I'll go to the armhole line. I'll come down by 2 inches from the mid armhole, and then I'll connect it back to the nipple point this way. Then I will extend that leg here by 2 inches. Then after that I'll finish off the armhole cuff. Alright, so the next thing now is to input our measurements. On the chest line I'm going to input the bust circumference measurements divided by 4. Then I'll measure the distance of my dart. I'll put it, then I'll put my seam allowance. Then I'll move to the waistline. I'll input the waist circumference measurement divided by 4. Then I'll measure the distance of the dart. I'll replace it and also add my seam allowance. Then after that I'll connect them together. Alright, so we are done drafting the princess dart bustier. The next thing we want to do now is to determine our yoke. So I measure 6 inches downward from the guideline. This totally depends on how low you want your yoke to be. It's not a static measurement. You can do whatever you want. Then I connect the point to the mid armhole like this. So after that I went back to the shoulder line, and then I input my neck width I'm doing a boat neckline, so my neck width here is 5 inches, then the neck depth is 2.75. Then after that, I connect the 2 points together. You can do any neck width or depth of your choice, measurement differs, so do whatever works for you. Then from the neck depth, I measure 1.5 inch downward, like this, 1.5 inch. Then after that, I went back to the yoke depth, and then from the folded edge, I measure 4 inches inward, like this. Then I connect these 2 points together. That's going to be the opening that is going to be around that chest area. That's the keyhole opening. So you can make it wider than this, depends on what you want, but the same formula is applicable. So meaning if you want it to be wider than this, you have to bring your yoke depth to come down more than where it is right now. I use this for my yoke depth, so it means you can bring it down all the way to your chest line. So it totally depends on you. Some people like it to open their cleavage, so do whatever you want. All right, so the next thing now is to cut it out. So I'm going to be bringing my Ankara fabric. So this is the fabric I'm using, and as you can see, it's already fused with my interfacing. I use stay for it, and note it's folded into 2. So I'll place my lining on top of it, and then I'm going to cut it out. But before then, I'm going to go back to the waistline at this side seam. I'll come up by 1 inch, and then I'll blend it back to this dart leg, like so. So this is just to allow the blouse to sit very well. Then the next thing now is to cut this out. Alright, so now I'm done cutting out the dart. The next thing now is to cut out my yoke. Don't forget to put notches on your under bust. Alright, so the next thing now is to cut from the yoke depth. Can you see, like this? Please be following the way I'm cutting it. I didn't fast forward this so that you can understand it better. After that, I cut off the neck and also cut the shoulder like this. So the next thing is to cut off the key opening. Can you see this part here? Just cut it off. You no longer need it. So this is how it's looking now. Can you see? This is the opening, and the next thing now is to replace our yoke with either our net or another fabric, or like in my own case, I'm using this chantilly trimming, so I'm going to be using it to cut the yoke. First, I fold my lace into 2, like this. Then after that, I fold it again into 4. Then after that, I place the yoke part right on top of it. Can you see? At this opening part, I'm going to add 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then at this other side, I'm going to add 1 inch seam allowance. Please kindly pay attention to it. So at this side here, I'm adding 1 inch seam allowance, like this. This is 1 inch seam allowance. Then at this cuffed part, I added just 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then after that, I'll cut it out. So the cuffed part, we have 1/2 inch allowance. Can you see? Then when you get to that point, go down 1/2 inch further, like this. Then this other side, you had 1 inch allowance. Can you see we have cut it? So the next is cut the neckline, and that is going to remain exactly the same thing. The shoulder, exactly the same thing, and also this other side is going to be exactly the same thing. So the only part that we added allowance is the lower part, and we added half here and then one at this other side. All right, so I just trim some of the edges of the lace so that I can use it to decorate the neckline, because that's how the style the client sent to me is. So if you open your yoke, this is how your yoke looks. So I'm just going to be using the edge of the lace to decorate the neck area. So that part is optional. All right, so when I open it up now, we have two yoke. So one is going to be used to line the other. And this is how it's looking. So I'm going to show you how to sew it now. Place the two yoke on top of each other, right side to right side. Then you're going to sew the neck area with half-inch seam allowance. Then this cuff part, you're going to sew it also with half-inch seam allowance. So when you're done with the neckline, next is the cuffed part here. So pay attention to the way I sew it. Starting from the hem of it, you sew half-inch all around and then back to the hem again. You start sewing with half-inch allowance starting from the hem like this. Then you keep your needle in when you get to that point and turn the fabric, and then you continue sewing with half-inch seam allowance. Then when you get back to the corner again, you keep your needle in and turn the fabric, and then you sew half-inch all the way down. So when you're done, the next thing is to put your notches. Just notch around the cuffed part and also on the neckline. Also notch the neckline. Alright, so the next thing you want to do now is to bring it to the right side. After that, you iron it flat. Alright, so your yoke is ready. The next is for you to attach it to the main body. So you take the main body and then you join your panels together. Alright, so remember I cut out the lacy edge, so I'm just going to top stitch it right on top of the neckline, because the style my client sent to me, that's how they made it. So I'm doing the same thing. So this one is optional. You can decide not to put the edge of anything around the neckline. Alright, I'm done attaching the lacy edge to the neckline. The next thing I'm going to do is to join the panels of the main bodies together. So this is the main body and this is how it's looking. I've already padded the bust area. I've cut out my hairstay to pad the bust area. So I'm going to join the panels together with half-inch seam allowance. And I'll also repeat the same thing on the lining piece. Alright, so I'm done joining the panels together and this is what I have. So the next thing is to notch all around, and then like I said, you're going to repeat the same step to your lining, and then I'll show you what next to do. Alright, so the next I'm going to do now is to attach my yoke to the main body. I'm going to start from the armhole side. So place the yoke on top of the main bodice. The yoke is facing the right side of the main body. Then you start from the armhole side, match them together, and then you run your stitch. You sew with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So when you're done with that side, you move to the second side. Make sure everything aligns properly. And then you stitch this side also with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Alright, so when you're done attaching the yoke to the main body, the next thing is to use your lining to turn it. Alright, so place the right side of the lining on top of it like this. Then you're going to sew around this area with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Alright, so this is how it's looking. Don't forget to notch that part so that by the time you turn it to the right side, it can relax nicely. Alright, so if you turn it to the right side now, this is how it looks. I'm making a gown, so I'm going to proceed to join this part to the skirt part. Can you see? This is how it's looking. Beautiful both inside and outside. So what is left for me is just to attach this to the down part. And that will be the end of the class for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Please kindly subscribe to this channel if you have not subscribed, and give this video a thumbs up. Bye. I'll see you next time.